So, good evening, everyone. My name is Eva. I am a PM here in Productboard. I am responsible for the roadmaps domain, which means that I talk to our customers about roadmaps a lot. And yeah, I also talk with them about the structure of their roadmaps and how they should tailor them for different audiences. And if we are very honest, it's a topic we have internally in Productboard as well. So I understand quite well why is it important thing to talk about. Just a small caveat in the beginning of the talk. I actually got ill. I got a sore throat this morning, so I apologize. It's always a great thing for a talk like this to be sick, but I'll do my best. And at the beginning, I actually am super curious. There was like 33% of people who are not product managers, so I just wonder, who are you? There's sales. Yeah. UX, okay. QA, cool. Anyone else? Some engineers? Yes. Okay, cool. All right. So let's get into it. So today, what am I going to talk to you about? So I'm going to talk about how to improve communications of your plans so everyone understands them. I'm also going to touch about how to think about your optimal roadmap structure. What I'm not going to talk about is how to set objectives, putting the right features on your roadmap, and measuring the impact of the feature. So basically the basics of road mapping I'm not going to cover today. Maybe to frame it a little bit more, so you might have seen this is a Productboard framework about the different proficiency levels of road mapping, from the very basic on level 1, without any clear understanding on what's on the product roadmap, to level 5 that everyone rallies around both the product strategy and roadmap. We're going to be on level 5 today. So I'm going to help you get everyone rallied around the product strategy and your roadmap. So I'm going to start with a scenario, and I wonder if you recognize the scenario. So imagine the following situation. So this is Bob. Bob is a product manager, and he is leading a project in a company, right? Or the project is super technical. It is basically building a very future-proof, scalable application. It's very engineering heavy, even almost engineering-led, right? It might be even multiple teams that have to contribute to this project. Now, Bob actually managed to create some kind of roadmap, but it's very technical. He actually also managed to align everyone around the common technical terms, right? But the roadmap is very technical. So then Bob goes, shows it to customer-facing teams, and of course gets the feedback that no one understands what is the customer value, right? Customer-facing team members such as sales or customer success look at it and they just don't understand what is the value for customers. So Bob maybe goes, he tries to change the name of the features on a roadmap to actually represent the customer value. But now the engineers complain that they don't understand because, the technical increments and the technical terms are not there. So Bob goes back and forth, tries to have it all, and basically ends up with a roadmap that no one understands. Anyone was ever in this scenario, this very hypothetical scenario that never happened to me, of course? Yes? No hands? Okay. But as you can imagine, the negative consequence of a scenario such as this could be that it's super hard to achieve any alignment between the product teams. It's very difficult to explain the product value to customers, and it's harder to justify the product strategy to the wider business. Now, imagine a different scenario. So Bob goes and actually prepares different roadmaps for different audiences, right? So it doesn't mean that he has to create multiple plans, it's still one plan, but he prepares a roadmap that's specifically tailored to the audience that he wants to target. So now you actually end up with a very positive consequences. You have, it's very easy to rally everyone under a common product vision. It's easy to connect customer releases to business value, and it's easier to facilitate cross-team collaboration and coordination. you might wonder, how do we get to the positive outcome? Let's talk about how can you make this happen. And I'm going to ask this framework that's called Jobs to be Done for a help. Have you heard about this framework? Yeah, I see some hands up. So I'll also quickly explain what it is. So the Jobs to be Done framework focuses on understanding the underlying motivation and desired outcomes of customers. If you don't really know this framework, I think it's extremely helpful, so I also recommend checking it out. But for this kind of scenario, I can give you an example. So, for example, you see a camera, right? On a surface level, if I ask you, what is camera used for? You might tell me, well, obviously to take pictures, right? But for different audiences, actually the motivations why to take the pictures differ quite dramatically, right? So if I take an example of a parent who wants to take pictures of a child's birthday, the actual motivation to take a picture is to capture a memory, right? For a wedding photographer, the motivation to take pictures is to make money, probably because they cost so much. For someone like a war photographer, the motivation is to have a visual representation of what is happening, right? So they all use a camera, but the reason why they use a camera differs a lot. And also, they use probably a different equipment, right? And they very likely don't use the same camera. So what is the parallel with roadmaps? So on a surface level, the why we do the roadmap is probably same for all the audiences, right? Like we do roadmaps to align people. But how do we actually align people, and with what we align people differs quite a lot of depending on the target audience. So I prepared for you today 3 steps to design the right roadmaps for your audience. And I'll walk you through them. So step 1 is to think about your personas and their needs. Step 2 is about design your roadmap so they fulfill the needs of the target audience. And step 3 is about creating your optimal roadmaps and communicating to the rest of the organization. I'm going to walk you through all the steps. So let's talk about personas and their needs. So imagine what are the different persona in your organization that you might want to think about, right? So for me, as a product manager in Productboard, I would probably think about these personas, right? Like this actually might differ based on your organization and based on your roles that you have there, but I would think about these ones. We can maybe start with like the product section here. So someone like product exec, their goal from roadmaps is that they want to understand the vision and they want to focus on the strategic planning, right? So they need to understand the outcomes and which high-level initiatives are going to contribute to the outcomes, right? They're probably not interested in very detailed level planning. Usually the more detailed, the more confusing. So they want to usually keep it super high level, right? If you go to someone like product leader or tribe leader, someone who manages multiple teams, they of course also still care about the outcomes, but they actually might start caring who is delivering each initiative, right? They might care about the dependencies between the teams, who is focusing on what. They might even try to prevent some blockers from happening, so it's super important to clearly understand what is each team working on. Someone like product manager, like most of you, we are of course responsible for a particular area of the product. So of course we manage the longer and the shorter term planning. We might be interested in like the lower level planning, but we might not do it, right? In Productboard, for example, engineering managers are responsible for the delivery. So they are typically the ones doing the sprint planning and the very detailed planning that goes with delivery. So if you take your personalized list them one by one and really think, what do they care about? That's the basic of it. Of course, you should do it with other teams, other personas. So if I take someone like customer-facing team, they likely don't care at all about your technical increments, right? The only thing that they care about is what is the value that you will provide for the customers, how they can get them excited, in the case of sales, how they can sell more stuff, right? Product marketing, on the other hand, might more care about the releases, what is gonna be released particular month, for example, so they can plan their work, and so on, so on. So the lesson here is that each persona has different needs, and one roadmap cannot possibly capture them all. I hear a lot from customers that they want to actually have only one roadmap that should have everything. I think, yeah, no, don't have one roadmap. It's not possible to have such a different needs captured in one roadmap. So when you think about the different personas, I would almost approach it as like mini discovery, right? Like you talk to your customers to learn about their needs and you ask questions, so do the same with your personas. I would pay special attention to what they are missing from your current roadmap. So every time someone is confused and has to ask you like, I don't understand this, I think that's your clue. You should really pay attention to that. And yeah, take into account your specific company context. For example, notable example would be that in some companies you have the structure that the leader of delivery is actually the product owner, right? Like for example, we don't have that in Productboard, so this might differ slightly for you. All right, so then we get to step 2, which is to design your roadmaps so they actually fulfill the needs of the target audience. So the good news here is that I'm not actually going to ask you to scratch all your roadmaps. I think the better approach is to actually take a hard look on your existing roadmaps and start asking questions. So the type of questions I would ask is, who is the target audience for the roadmap? And if you catch yourself saying it's everyone, it's never everyone. Yeah, so that's a major red flag. I would also ask, what is the primary purpose of the roadmap? What are you trying to achieve? If there is more than one group, do they have actually the same needs? And if they don't, shouldn't they actually have 2 different roadmaps? And the golden question, is this the right level of detail for the audience? That one is, of course, the hardest, but super important nevertheless. So having that in your mind, I actually have an exercise for you. Maybe I ask Jirka to, I don't know where Jirka is, yes. All right, so do you kind of see what is on this roadmap or not? Not really? Okay, I'll try to describe it and then I ask you what is the purpose of the roadmap, right? So on the roadmap you have, well, several features, right? You have a different mix of features, so there's stuff that is very value focused, such as see who is in the channel, is active right now. And you have also stuff that is a bit more like technical increments, such as video calls, volume 2. Right, so it's a bit of a mix. It's not really clear who owns it. They are quite independent team, but yeah, it's not very clear to me at least what is the purpose. So if I ask you, what is the purpose and who is the target audience of a roadmap like that? You can answer in Slido. What is there? So it's PM, everyone. Yes, it's always everyone. Product team, engineering design, product managers. Okay. Everyone, yes. Well, you're right that person who would create roadmap like that, and I actually saw a roadmap like that, would probably answer that the audience is everyone. But at least to me, it's like totally not clear what am I trying to do in this organization. I sort of get an idea that some features are being worked on, right? But I don't understand by who. Why am I doing that? What are the blockers? The sequence is not super clear. Yeah, not a great roadmap. The answer of the person, I of course recreated it, this is not the actual roadmap, but the answer of this person would be that it's a multiple team roadmap. Right, so multiple teams would contribute to this roadmap and they would try to align. I have a bit further better example of how such a roadmap could look like. So then we get to step 3, which is to create your optimal roadmaps communicated to the rest of the organization. So I have a few tips. Some of them I've learned the hard way. Um, but yeah, I think my overall tip for all of this is basically make it your mini discovery, right? It doesn't have to be massive discovery. If you don't know what discovery is, then wait for the talk by Sam. But it's okay not to get it right the first time. I think it's much better to release it, learn from it, and iterate on it. What I think is absolutely crucial is the second part, which is about communicating the types of roadmaps to the organization. I actually have a few tips on how to do that a bit later. I would personally start, if you're a product leader or someone who is managing multiple teams, I would personally start with the team roadmaps and try to align on that. Because if that breaks, everything else breaks, right? Because the team roadmap somehow bubbles up to the tribe roadmap or multiple team roadmap, however you call it. I would start with that. But the hardest part on all of this is to agree on the same level of granularity of certain items, right? Like, what is the granularity of a epic or of features? Like, in my teams, we had so many discussions about this. It's a super hard discussion, and it takes a while. So if you have 5 meetings on this topic, don't be surprised. And of course, the last point is about retrospecting, so make sure that you retrospect on the process. Otherwise, well, the first bullet point doesn't really make sense, right? If you iterate, you also have to retrospect. I would personally, like when I mentioned the communication, I would personally, in Notion or in whatever format or like wiki that you have, I would fill in this template for each of your roadmaps. Right? So I would clearly describe what is the roadmap good for. I would mention the goal of the roadmap, the owner, ideally one, because if there's multiple owner, then no one owns it. What is the intended audience? Who are the contributors? There can be multiple contributors, right? But only one owner. And most importantly, what are the needs of the audience? So, also, of course, the connected meeting. So if the roadmap is reviewed once every week on such a meeting, then it should also be obvious that which meeting is that, so everyone has a chance to go and update the roadmap before the meeting. I just have an example here. So for example, for high-level strategic roadmap, right, you would describe that this roadmap is to communicate the high-level plans. The goal of the roadmap is to tell the story to the rest of the organization about what are we doing. You could show which body of work contributes to which initiatives. Of course, if you have a goal like that, then you're probably not interested in epics or anything too granular. It should be super high level. If the owner is, for example, the tribe leader or group product manager, the contributors are typically product managers. A connected meeting in this case could be something like a check-in call. The intended audience in this case could be execs, go-to-market teams, and the rest of the company. And then, the needs could be, for example, that they want to understand what is coming, why, what are the customer benefits. All right, so I want to end with actually giving you a few examples of a roadmap structure. Again, the caveat is that this could differ based on your organization, but for organizations such as Productboard, we would land with structure similar to this. So of course, we would have a team roadmap, which is a roadmap for a single team, planning the delivery of that particular team. In this case, the audience is mostly the actual product team, right? So think about what actual product team wants to see. So likely they want to understand the goals you're trying to achieve. So you can, for example, have that as a swim lane. Ideally, each feature should be connected to a larger company goal, right? So here, a larger company goal would be on whatever on the card or somewhere communicated as well, because people somehow like that. They like knowing that they contribute to something bigger than the team. It should be also very clear what stages of product development each feature is at, right? If it's still in progress, delivery, or discovery. Then you might end up with more of a tactical tribe roadmap. Remember this kind of roadmap? What I showed you before, right? That it was a mess. No swim lanes. It wasn't clear what each team is doing. A better version of that would be that you would have a team as a swim lane. You would have clearly indicated for someone like product leader if the if the feature is on track or at risk, right? Because need of such a if I take the product leader, for example, their need is to understand, well, first of all, what is going on, but also if something is at risk, right? So they can somehow intervene and they can try to prevent the risk and the delayed delivery. So I would kind of do it this way. So for a strategic roadmap, which is super high level to show the product strategy to the entire organization, I would keep this one super high level. Likely no one even cares about what's underneath the initiatives, right? So I would think about it that you have some kind of objectives, for example, as a swim lane. You have the initiatives that are very customer focused and phrased that way. And you would also ideally, so for example, coloring in this case could indicate that if it's about retention or fixing product gaps, things like that. And then lastly, you could have, for example, a release roadmap, which is a roadmap for PMM team to plan their work, right? So for someone like a PMM team, they likely don't care about the duration at all of the activity, they just care about the end date. They care about when is it coming. So on a roadmap like this, they can clearly, super quickly see that February is going to be busy, right? A lot of stuff coming in February, so PMM team needs to plan upfront for that. All right, so that's it. I would like to leave you with this framework again. So if you want to tailor your roadmap to the different audiences, think about the personas and their needs. Design your roadmap so they fulfill the needs of the target audience, and create your optimal roadmaps, and most importantly, communicate it to the rest of the organization. All right, thank you. And if you have any questions, you can also ask them in the QR code. You can also raise your hand. Yes, yes. The question was, how many roadmaps do I have? Like, that I'm the owner of, or we have in Productboard? Me personally. So personally, I'm responsible for the team roadmap, right? Because anything above that is not my responsibility. It's like the responsibility of the product leader above me. How to deal with the changing dates in the roadmap? Well, I mean, the dates will be changing, right? But the most important thing is to communicate why they are changing, right? So, well, I can tell you how would I communicate it in an app like Productboard, but if you don't have a Productboard, it's probably also possible. But in Productboard, for example, you have the health status that should indicate if the feature is at risk, right? So every time you change a date, you should somehow communicate it to product leader, who probably cares about it the most, or the other teams who are dependent on you that it's changing. But yeah, I would be super proactive in communicating that. Do you believe that all roadmaps should take? Do you believe that all roadmaps should take the shape of a Gantt chart? What other formats are suitable and for which audiences? No, you can of course also use things like Kanban, all right? So for team roadmap, we actually did use like a column or Kanban roadmap for quite some time, especially when it was more about like a quarterly planning, when we planned the releases of like a large initiative, then we would have like a column roadmap, right? And each of the column would represent a release. You can also do that. But for a like sprint planning, you could also in theory use something more like column. I think it's a bit more about the dependencies. And if you actually really cared about visualizing the dates, or the dates are not that relevant for you and you're actually okay with having now, next, later structure, that really depends on you, I think. Right. In your opinion, what is the most important aspect of roadmaps? Manage deadlines or order queue of task features? Well, that I would say it's like very, it's phrased in a way that it has to be one or the other. I would say the most important aspect of roadmaps is to make sure everyone understands what you're doing, right? To manage deadlines is like the consequence of that. So if everyone understands what I'm doing, then of course I should probably look at the deadlines and make sure that people are meeting them. Though, for example, in Productboard, managing deadline would be more of a engineering manager job because that's part of the delivery. But yeah. How to avoid a stakeholder taking the end dates as fixed. It's a pretty common problem. Yep, that is pretty common problem, but yeah, that's sorry to tell you, but it's up to you to educate them, right? That, um, yeah, that the end date, like, it's a conversation, right? So like, if it's the, oh, sorry, I didn't see it's here. If it's a fixed scope, fixed time, you have to communicate this well. Like, yeah, I don't think I have a better advice than that.
Updating, keep everybody in mind and work on that. So what would you say is a healthy time to spend on prototyping per week as a PM?
Yeah, ideally, it's not that much because your engineering manager does it for you. But ideally, it shouldn't be that much, right? Because if you have a tool that's integrated with Jira, then a lot of the stuff uh, updates automatically. But yeah, I would say at least when you have a sprint planning or something like that, then I would spend some time before the sprint planning to update it. But I wouldn't say it should be hours, for sure not. If you have hours, it's not good. I think that's it. Then thank you so much.